facing a primary challenge this year and talks about why she is running. I ask you this not in a facetious way, but having worked in Washington, been on Capitol Hill, and observed it as it is now, I'm always interested in why people decide to run again, to go back to the U.S. House of Representatives.
You know, after the year we've had, it's a fair question. I'll just say that. You know, it has been frustrating. And folks who are regular subscribers to my newsletter know that despite my indefatigable optimism, I have been frustrated with, you know, the inability of this Congress to come together and get things done. And, you know, we all take responsibility in that, but you know, the leadership has failed to put bills on the floor that are going to move the needle on things like immigration reform. You know, it has been a breakneck moment when it comes to even passing our basic funding bills. I'm running again because despite all of that, I've been able to deliver some incredible wins for West Michigan, bringing home over $100 million. That's in taxpayer refunds, Social Security payments that our constituents are due, as well as grants and investments in our roads, bridges, cleaning up our water. We're just getting started on this kind of work, and there's so much ahead that I can't wait to finish.
Is that where you find the success? Because, and again, I don't want to be unduly harsh, but if I were to grade the last 2 years of what's happened in the House and Senate, I don't think it's passing grade for the American people. So is the success that you find in being in the House by being able to represent the three counties that you have, the parts of three counties that you have, and that's where you find the value in this?
It certainly has been these last 2 years. You know, I mean, let's take a look at something like immigration, right? I came to Congress to get things done on many issues, but this one in particular, having spent close to 20 years working on this issue.
And we talked about this when you were running 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. We came so close on a bipartisan border deal, you know, passed out of the Senate. The Republicans asked for it, and then the House has refused to bring it up because the former president said, don't do it. You know, I see how that type of dysfunction is deeply harmful to the American public. And, you know, I believe that the more people who are pragmatic, solution-oriented, continue to run, to stand up for this kind of service, you know, we won't stand for that type of chaos and division.
I had not planned to ask you about this, but you brought it up twice now, and this immigration bill. There was a provision in that bill that would allow a certain number of people to continue to flow across the border. And I have to ask you, as one who has, as you point out, for 20 years worked in this, is that acceptable?
There is no amount of illegal immigration
but that was
acceptable. So, you know, it was not a perfect bill, and it didn't allow individuals to flow over illegally, right? It allowed people to come here to continue to seek asylum, right? Which presenting yourself at the border and seeking asylum is legal, right? I believe we need a better way for individuals to continue to seek asylum in this country. Namely, you know, my bill, the Bipartisan Dignity Act, creates in-country processing centers so individuals aren't forced to come as close to our southern border and present themselves. There would be processing centers in their country of origin where they could present themselves and have their cases adjudicated. That would be my best option. But, you know, unfortunately, in the United States Congress, we can't always have the perfect piece of cake.
Being one of 435, right?
I mean, that's the thing. We're one of 435. We're existing in an imperfect environment. And I deeply believe we can't let perfect be the enemy of good when it comes to getting things done. You know, that bill would have also provided for thousands of additional border security agents at the southern border to, you know, create a safe, secure, and orderly process, which we desperately need.
If you're successful in the primary and then moving on to the general election, what do you want to do? What is the possible? And I ask you that question against this background.
Yeah.
There will be a Democratic majority, there will be a Republican majority, and either one of them is going to be pretty slim.
Yeah.
So given that no matter who's in charge,
yeah.
they don't have enough votes to really get it done. I mean, unless something dramatic happens.
Right.
This has been a year for dramatic things happening in politics. So,
exactly.
If you follow the wisdom of the past, it's going to be a narrow margin either way. What do you hope to get done in that environment?
Yeah, well, I would still remain optimistic that we could get some big things done. Continuing on immigration, there are some significant tax expirations that are coming up from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we need to address. It's going to be a big tax year. We have to focus on getting a tax plan right that works for the American people, addresses the situation that we are in, and also, my sort of stock in trade is finding the nitty gritty, hyper technical things that might not draw the headlines, but that make a really big difference for the American public, specifically saving us money, allowing individuals to have increased access to capital when it comes to starting a small business. If you look at all of the bills that I have introduced, they're bipartisan, and two, they provide very real and immediate relief when it comes to changing things that maybe people overlooked when they were drafting some initial legislation. So we have, over a dozen bills in the hopper that would do things just like that. And I'm hoping to continue to find bipartisan support, get those bills passed, even if we can't do it in regular order, do it in suspension. One very small thing, example relevant here to West Michigan is, when it comes to air traffic control towers, ours is the oldest in the country of the top 75 busiest airports, longest operational. It is out of ADA compliance. It's past security compliance. Why haven't we been able to get the FAA to do this? Turns out there's no standards for how the FAA needs to prioritize when and how to replace these towers. I got that changed in the FAA reauthorization. Didn't make breaking news like some of my more dramatic colleagues, but it's going to make a really big difference. Grand Rapids is now number 2 for replacement.
And when they build it, I think it will make headlines. Congresswoman, I'm going to ask you one final question. Given your background and your history, given the fact that you are a professional, you had a career that you could have pursued and certainly did, you have a family, is it worth it to be in your position, understanding that many of us would have loved at some point to be in the U.S. House of Representatives, but looking at it today, you make a lot of sacrifices. The half hour you carved out for us here today. But your time is not your own. You're constantly on the move and very often not at home. Is it worth it?
Absolutely. The work that I get to do every day serving West Michigan is so rewarding. I almost get emotional talking about it, Rick. It's the honor of my lifetime to get to do this job. When I go to Washington and I climb those steps to the Capitol, I'm coming back from the district and I'm thinking about the people here who have never had a voice like mine in West Michigan, whether that's a woman, a mother, somebody who, is raising her own children while also taking care of aging parents who are still in great health. Not saying anything, mom and dad, but dealing with those things and again, also paying my own student loans, paying my mortgage, building a future that works for working families like mine is so important to people here in West Michigan. And I take that responsibility seriously and with immense pride.
Small business owner and real estate agent Salim Al-Shatel is challenging his fellow Democrat in Tuesday's primary. Let's talk about your motivation to run. You have a sitting Democratic member of the U.S. House. You're running in the primary against her. Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, so it was a tough decision, but I took some time to think about it. I was actually an alternate delegate through the state party and helping with her re-election campaign efforts. I bought into what she said, the commercials that we all saw. Democrats stop the spend and kind of being a more moderate Democrat. And since I've seen her take office, there's been a lot of things that came up that were concerns for me. One, she voted yes on the extension of FISA and the warrantless searches of that FISA 702 program. That's something that the previous representative, Justin Amash, he really hammered home, and I agreed with him. Because in our Fourth Amendment rights, you have to have a warrant to perform searches, and I feel like that violates it. She has voted yes to continue these ongoing wars in the Middle East and also what's going on in Europe as well, sending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars overseas. And if you go onto her Congressional website, you can see a list of projects that she was supposed to request federal funding for. One of the big ones was the Muskegon Heights Broadway Avenue project. Was supposed to request $5.1 million for it. She got $500,000 for it. That's an area that's very underfunded and, you know, has voted yes on all of these foreign aid packages that have gone through. Again, hundreds of billions of dollars. She also voted yes on the TikTok ban, which might sound like a kind of small social media thing for a lot of people, but to me, that was a suppression of freedom of speech for 170 million Americans that use that platform. She pushed it as a Chinese company, when in reality, 60% of it is owned by a group of international investors, 20% is owned by employees, 7,000 of which are American, and then 20% by the 2 Chinese developers that started it. And if it was such a concern of the Chinese influence with that, I'd point to, what about the Goshen Chinese battery plant up near Big Rapids, where you had state and federal lawmakers that signed non-disclosure agreements, including Elisa Slotkin, who's running for Senate, candidate that Hillary Scholten endorsed, that was forced upon them because of politicians signing those non-disclosure agreements as well. So I think it's a culmination of a lot of those things, whether it's the spending, not talking about our rise in healthcare costs that we're seeing. I mean, in 1960, we spent 5% of our GDP on healthcare costs. We're up to 17% of it now, most of which are on chronic diseases. We need to talk about this type of stuff. I want to talk about big pharmaceutical companies as well. Us and New Zealand are the only 2 countries that allow direct-to-consumer advertisements for pharmaceutical companies. And it's a huge lobbyist group that's out there in DC, along with just all the other super PACs that are influencing our politicians. I look at my Democratic opponent, along with one of my Republican opponents, are backed by super PACs. Hillary's being backed by AIPAC, which is a super PAC that does not comply and lobbies on behalf of a foreign country and does not comply with FARA, which is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So to me, those are deep concerns that I'm having. They bragged about spending willing to spend $100 million in this campaign cycle to influence our election cycles. As an American, that's terrifying. I don't care what party you're associated with. We need to have honest elections where there is no outside influence.
Let's talk about what you would do if you were successful both in the primary and the general election. What would be your approach to being a member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
I think the biggest thing when I've had conversations with a lot of people, whether it's old or young, whatever demographic it may be, is just being honest. I have the reality of it all. I'll be one of 435 people, a freshman congressman. I understand that I'm not going to change the world as just one person. So I'd like to point to just where my stances are, where my mindset's at with a lot of topics. Because once I get in there, then I can look to have more influence from there. You're going to have the Tax and Jobs Cuts Act from 2017. Those tax breaks are coming up in 2025. I've been a small business owner, and I saw the benefits of lowering the corporate tax rate to 21%. That's something that I feel like my party kind of misses on when we talk about the slogan of corporations need to pay their fair share, which I totally agree. You can see headlines of corporations, Fortune 500 companies that pay almost 0% in federal tax rates. But we need to separate the Fortune 500 companies from the small businesses in our communities. I came over from the Muskegon area today. There are a lot of small businesses that are the backbone and the important parts of those communities. So I want to support keeping that corporate tax rate low. You had the World Economic Forum this spring where 250 billionaires and millionaires came forward saying we want a 2% wealth tax. And Janet Yellen, our Secretary of Treasury, part of the Democratic administration, she came forth and said she was the only person that said, no, I wouldn't support that. So I think it's important that we close some of those tax loopholes for the Fortune 500 companies, for those bigger billionaire people, and make it more affordable for people to live here. Housing's been an important one as well. I'm 31. I know I'm thankful I do have a home, but there are a lot of people like my age that are trying to purchase their first home. So the two big things with that is you're looking at the spending and the value of the dollar there. $35 trillion in debt. I'm sure you'll have my Republican opponents come on here. They're going to hammer that point home with you pretty intensely there. But I agree, our federal spending and our debt is what's causing these home prices to jump up so much. Because we went in 2020 to current day, we went from $260,000 was the average price of a home to now over $400,000. I've worked in the real estate industry, so I understand this. But we've gone from an interest rate as well from about 2.25% to now almost 7%. That monthly payment has almost doubled for a lot of people. And so, not to mention the private equity groups that are now involved in these single-family home purchases. You have about 5% of single-family homes are owned by private equity, and they're looking at, on this rate, about 40% by the year 2030 that they're going to own these single-family homes. And I think that we need to address these issues because people like myself that are younger trying to buy those first-time homes are having a difficult time getting in there because the value of the dollar has decreased so much because of our federal spending on these forever wars, but also the interest rates are hard for people to get in there and compete with as well.
The interest rate, inflation, the expansion of prices for homes, as you point out, all part of this election cycle. But what do you do about that? Because I have talked to any number of candidates for different offices, and everybody, almost to a person, will identify inflation and the economy as big issues, and we see that in our polling. Mm-hmm. But you pointed out just a moment ago, you'd be one of 435. And you can't fix inflation. The president can't fix inflation. But what can you do to start to work towards the idea of helping to lower the inflationary pressures and thereby, hopefully, allowing the Fed to start taking some of the pressure off of interest rates?
Well, I wouldn't say that the president doesn't have some type of power. I would say he has, or he or she, whoever it may be, has a lot more power than I would.
They have power, but I mean, you don't have to look much further than Gerald Ford to see that the president alone cannot reduce inflation.
Right. I look at, one of the big things was the $1.2 trillion spending package that went through this past spring. I don't support those large spending packages without some type of scrutiny from people like yourself and even the national media as well, scrutinizing what's in those spending packages. I mean, I was trying to go through it myself, and it's 1,000-some pages, and
that was delivered the night before.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, on top of trying to campaign, trying to keep up with voter contacts, and try to get out there door knocking, while also trying to read the 1,000 pages, it's hard to maintain all of that. And I look at Hillary Scholten. I do not fault her for as far as the amount of responsibilities that she has. I'd like to keep that in perspective for her as well. I understand she has a lot to do, but I wouldn't support those large spending packages and we need some type of window for people to actually scrutinize, people like you to go through there and say, Salim, do you support the specific part of it? So I think that's the biggest thing that could really help with the spending packages and spending and lowering our national debt there. I do look at our military and defense budget as well, where we're spending more. We spend as much as the next 9 countries combined on defense. And we need to look at some of this stuff because we're looking at the current situation. I don't feel as safe with all this money that we're spending. I don't feel like we've gotten any safer from it all. So that's something that I think we need to look at and have honest conversations with as well.
Final question, how do you win? It's a big kind of sprawled out district now. It used to be a little bit more compact and be full of entire counties. Now it's a portion of 3 counties.
Yep.
Stretches from here in Grand Rapids all the way to the lake shore.
Yep.
Ottawa County, Muskegon, parts of Muskegon County, parts of Ottawa County,
parts of Kent County. Yeah,
yep. Right.
Don't want to leave them out.
Right, that's right. So actually 4. So how do you win when you're running against an incumbent?
Not just an incumbent, a well-funded incumbent. I mean, last election cycle, she raised almost $4 million. 79% of her individual contributions came from outside of the district. If you include PAC money as well, I mean, you're looking at close to 90% of that money coming from outside of the district. But still, when I go around and knock doors in Kentwood, in Muskegon, and areas that I don't feel like are very talked to, they still don't know who she is, and they don't feel like they're being represented by someone. So as far as how do I win? Well, the conversations that I have with people that are very much inside the political realm versus outside, it's very different, because people that are outside of the political realm they want an honest, transparent politician. They want someone that's showing up to different events and being there and showing their face. I mean, heck, I was just at some guy's 70th backyard birthday party in Kentwood because we met at the Juneteenth event in downtown Calder Plaza. Because again, I don't have millions of dollars. If you want to volunteer and work on my team, you're doing it because you really stand behind me, not because I'm paying you or anything like that, because I don't have the funds for that type of stuff. But I've been showing that I'm willing to have conversations with people and having those tough conversations on topics, talking about healthcare, talking about big pharma, talking about housing. I do find that, you know, it's been a big part of my party, but talking about women's reproductive rights is a big part of my party's 2024 election cycle. I totally agree. However, I support the Equal Rights Amendment Act, which is something that even opponents of it have called out that it would have prevented Dobbs versus Jackson. And that's something that my Democratic opponent has not said that she supports. So I'm willing to talk about all these different topics with people and be scrutinized, be questioned, all of this type of stuff. And I think a lot of people are responding well to it because they're thinking, hey, you know, this guy's putting people over politics and willing to have conversations with people. I mean, I'm coming from Muskegon today. That's a 50-50 area between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, my best friend's parents might be big Trump or Republican supporters. And it's important to have those conversations rather than people that are just gonna be those yes people and encouraging me throughout the whole process. I need to be scrutinized and need to be questioned because at the end of the day, you know, with the current height and toxicity of politics right now, it's important that we focus on issues that are impacting people's lives and not making this Republican versus Democrat. We're all Americans and we're all looking to put the best policies forward here to move our country forward.
Republicans